There's always a certain amount of pressure put on you to have a hit record, but I don't really think for a group like us it's that worrying.
Robert Smith has carried shadows across stages for decades. His voice, part him, part wound, defined The Cure as both a sanctuary and a weapon. But behind the black eyeliner and swirling guitars lies something else: judgment.
Is at the heart of so much discontent and idiocy in the world.
Smith has spent a lifetime resisting the machinery of the music industry. He mocked trends, sneered at posturing, and dismantled the myths of rock celebrity. Yet, for all his detachment, he never stopped measuring others. Some artists he praised with rare tenderness. Others he dismissed with a single brutal phrase. Because for Smith, music was sacred. Those who betrayed its heart earned not just his criticism, but his contempt. His judgments carried weight precisely because they were not careless. They came sharpened with philosophy, an artist's warning that when truth is stripped away, sound becomes theater. He laughed, he mocked, he spat venom, and when Robert Smith finally named the musicians he hated most, it was not cheap gossip. It was defiance, delivered like a manifesto. Here are the 5 names he could never forgive, and the reasons why. Number 1, Morrissey. The rivalry between Robert Smith and Morrissey became one of the most infamous in alternative music. Both frontmen shaped the 1980s with irony and melancholy, yet their philosophies clashed. Smith mocked Morrissey's self-righteousness, while Morrissey sneered at The Cure's sound. Their feud spilled across interviews, with Smith once calling Morrissey a precious twerp. For Smith, it was not just a personality clash. It was about authenticity. He despised the moral posturing and narrow definitions of taste Morrissey carried like weapons. At its core, the battle was not only between two musicians, but between two visions of what art should be. The Smiths embodied a brittle romanticism, draped in irony and a kind of intellectual elitism. The Cure, meanwhile, thrived on atmosphere, on mood, on making despair feel like a cathedral of sound. Smith believed in the messiness of emotion, while Morrissey sharpened his into pronouncements about purity and principle. Smith once remarked that Morrissey has a limited view of music, almost puritanical, dismissing anything outside his narrow canon. The comment revealed Smith's larger frustration with artists who judged music as if it were a contest of virtue. For Smith, music was a vessel for chaos and contradiction. He saw Morrissey's lectures as suffocating, as if the point was to control rather than to feel. Morrissey, of course, fired back. He mocked The Cure's gloom, quipping that their music was designed for people who don't have a life. That jab struck at the heart of Smith's philosophy. Immersion in darkness was not melodrama, it was truth. To reduce The Cure's work to caricature was proof that Morrissey could not comprehend its sincerity. The tension between them played out publicly, in magazines and interviews, creating one of rock's most enduring Cold Wars. And yet, beneath the venom, there was irony. Both mined loneliness, both wore theatricality as armor, and both built cults of personality. Their feud was less about difference than reflection, the irritation of seeing a distorted mirror. For Robert Smith, Morrissey symbolized the artist who mistook judgment for authenticity. The Cure's music opened doors, Morrissey's closed them. And that, in Smith's eyes, was the unforgivable sin. Number 2, Bono. Where Smith wrapped himself in shadows, Bono bathed in spotlight. Smith bristled at what he saw as U2's sanctimonious grandeur, stadium sermons masquerading as rock shows. In interviews, he often dismissed Bono's ego, suggesting that sincerity cannot be staged with floodlights and slogans. For Smith, The Cure's intimacy was the opposite of U2's bombast. The disdain was less about sound and more about ethos. Smith hated the theater of self-importance. Robert Smith built his reputation on rejecting spectacle. The Cure's greatest moments came not from oversized gestures, but from subtle textures. A whispered lyric, a guitar line stretched like silk across silence. In contrast, Bono's reputation as a world-saving frontman embodied everything Smith distrusted. To Smith, the message was clear. U2 turned music into sermon and the stage into a pulpit. In one interview, Smith scoffed that Bono likes to think he's saving the world with a guitar solo. It was a jab at U2's tendency to frame rock as activism cloaked in grandeur. For Smith, sincerity could not be scaled up with lights and slogans. It had to be lived in the song itself. That difference in philosophy was why he reserved such scorn for Bono. The Cure's concerts thrived on atmosphere, fog, shadows, the sense of stepping into another emotional dimension. By contrast, U2 crafted spectacles designed to fill entire stadiums with soaring declarations. Where Bono delivered anthems for unity, Smith delivered meditations on isolation. One reached outward, the other inward. The clash was inevitable. Bono himself never fired back with the same venom. Instead, his public image was so rooted in charity and righteousness that Smith's barbs felt like an antidote to the myth. To Smith, Bono embodied the danger of believing one's own legend, that moment when music becomes sermon and the artist becomes priest. The disdain was not just about U2's sound, it was about what Smith saw as the emptiness behind the spectacle. And in his eyes, Bono's platform demanded reverence rather than intimacy. For Robert Smith, Bono symbolized everything the Cure refused to become, a monument to ego rather than a vessel for feeling. And in Smith's world, that was a betrayal worth hating. Number 3, Robert Palmer. Smooth, polished, radio-friendly, Robert Palmer embodied the glossy side of 1980s pop that Smith rejected. While Palmer's Addicted to Love conquered MTV, Smith ridiculed the corporate varnish that stripped songs of fragility. To him, Palmer represented everything the Cure was not: controlled, slick, digestible. Smith's hatred was philosophical, proof that once art became product, it lost its soul. Robert Smith had no patience for music engineered in boardrooms. He believed songs should feel raw, unstable, even a little dangerous. Palmer, in contrast, was the picture of professionalism, suited up, sharply produced, flanked by perfectly choreographed models in his iconic videos. That image, burned into MTV's rotation, embodied the glossy commodification Smith despised. Smith once remarked that music should sound like it's bleeding, not like it's dressed for dinner. To him, Palmer's sound was dressed to perfection, every note ironed flat, every imperfection erased. The very polish that made Palmer a mainstream darling made him, in Smith's eyes, a symbol of everything false in pop. The contrast with The Cure could not have been sharper. Songs like A Forest or Disintegration thrived on atmosphere, on layers of vulnerability that refused to be smoothed away. They invited listeners into darkness rather than dazzling them with sheen. Palmer's pop, by contrast, sold fantasy, sleek, accessible, easy to consume. For Smith, that was not artistry. It was advertising. The disdain was not only about sound, it was about influence. Smith worried that Palmer's brand of manufactured cool taught audiences to prize surface over substance, turning music into wallpaper rather than confession. To Smith, the danger was not just one artist, but the ripple effect of artists chasing radio polish at the expense of raw expression. And yet, the irony lingered. Both men moved within the same decade. Both crafted enduring hits. Both etched their styles into cultural memory. But where Palmer offered control, Smith offered catharsis. For audiences who craved honesty, The Cure became the antidote to Palmer's polish. For Robert Smith, Robert Palmer stood as proof that the industry's gloss could never match the gravity of emotion. One made music to decorate, the other made music to endure. And in Smith's world, decoration was never enough. Number 4, Frank Sinatra. Strange as it sounds, Robert Smith reserved sharp words for legends. He dismissed Sinatra's crooning as smug performance, a style built on charm rather than vulnerability. For a singer like Smith, who mined the rawest emotions, Sinatra's effortless cool felt hollow. He once quipped that Sinatra's music was for people who wanted to pretend they felt something, rather than confront the real thing. It was a jab not at the notes, but at the absence of pain. To understand the barb, one must see the gulf between the two artists. Sinatra was the very definition of suave. His voice smooth, his phrasing impeccable, his image carefully groomed as the chairman of the board. For audiences of the mid-20th century, he embodied aspiration, glamour, and control. But for Smith, whose work bled with fragility and fracture, that polish looked like a mask. Smith once remarked that great music should sound like someone unraveling, not someone posing. To him, Sinatra's calculated delivery offered performance without exposure. The Cure's catalog, by contrast, thrived on the opposite principle, on exposing wounds, on refusing to sand down the edges. Songs like Plain Song or Lullaby drew power from imperfection, from the sense that the singer was teetering on the brink of collapse. This was not merely a generational divide, it was philosophical. Smith distrusted any art form that built itself on cool detachment. In his view, detachment was a kind of dishonesty, a refusal to confront the real cost of feeling. Sinatra's crooning, for all its mastery, suggested a safe distance from emotion, as if heartbreak could be sung through a smile. To Smith, that distance undermined the purpose of song itself. And yet, the irony is sharp. Both men commanded absolute devotion. Sinatra with his Rat Pack swagger, Smith with his Gothic mystique. Both built identities so distinct they transcended music, shaping culture in their own eras. But their ends diverged. Sinatra made listeners feel untouchable, while Smith forced them to confront vulnerability head-on. For Robert Smith, Sinatra represented the danger of art turned into posture, smooth, beautiful, unforgettable, but to Smith, empty at its core. And for a man who demanded truth in every note, emptiness was the one sin he could never forgive. Number 5. The Thompson Twins. Smith's contempt for the Thompson Twins spoke to his broader rejection of New Wave's polished excess. Their bright synth hooks and pastel aesthetics epitomized a pop culture Smith felt alienated from. Where the Cure wrestled with despair and beauty, the Twins radiated a cheer he found dishonest. He saw them not as peers, but as imposters, proof that fashion could drown out feeling. His hatred was laced with irony. In mocking them, he defined himself more clearly. The Thompson Twins rose quickly in the early 1980s, crafting hits like Hold Me Now and Doctor Doctor that filled dance floors and dominated MTV. Their sleek production, colorful wardrobes, and radio-friendly choruses captured the optimism of a decade moving toward gloss. To many, they were the face of new wave accessibility, but to Robert Smith, they represented the very surface-level gloss that the Cure was resisting. Smith once said that pop music should be more than just wallpaper for people to smile at. His critique of the Thompson Twins was not personal, it was philosophical. He saw their music as an emblem of detachment, designed to be consumed quickly, worn like a fashion trend, and discarded just as fast. For an artist who believed songs should scar and linger, that kind of disposability was unforgivable. The Cure and the Thompson Twins shared stages on the festival circuit, yet their energies collided. The Cure's sprawling sets plunged audiences into dreamlike introspection, while the Twins offered breezy choruses that evaporated as soon as the lights dimmed. For Smith, their presence was a reminder that not all music was chasing depth, some was chasing style. And yet, in a strange twist, the rivalry served Smith as well as it irritated him. By mocking the Thompson Twins, he sharpened his own identity. The Cure stood apart not only for what they were, but for what they refused to become. The Twins symbolized the path of surface sheen, while the Cure clung to substance, no matter how bleak. In the end, the Thompson Twins were not simply a band Smith disliked. They were a cultural foil. Their brightness defined his shadows more clearly, their cheer underscoring his despair. And for Robert Smith, that contrast was not just rivalry, it was revelation, proof that his chosen path had meaning. Robert Smith's hatreds were never casual. They were not the cheap dismissals of ego, but the sharp edges of a philosophy. He believed music mattered too much to be surrendered to vanity, spectacle, or fashion. Every name he condemned was a way of defending what he valued most: honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to feel. And that is why these feuds endure. They tell us less about the musicians he despised and more about the convictions that fueled the Cure. In Smith's world, art was never neutral. It was either alive or dead, either opening doors or closing them. To him, falsehood was a greater enemy than silence, and betrayal of feeling was worse than failure itself. That is the paradox of Robert Smith. To hate so fiercely was also to love music even more. His scorn became a strange form of devotion, a reminder that the heart of song is always worth protecting. Which of Robert Smith's rivalries do you think cut the deepest? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of music's hidden battles and unguarded truths.